As Benjamin Franklin is alleged to have said, quote, "Democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what is for dinner. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote," unquote. Simple majorities are no guarantee of wisdom or justice. Introduction. As we've noted previously, a biblical understanding of natural law is the idea that nature, creation, reflects its maker truly, and the image of God in fallen man is capable of receiving enough of that revelation to be liable for it, but suppresses some elements of that truth in unrighteousness, distorting the truth in the process. The theological names for various aspects of this are general revelation and common grace. In the same way that general revelation and common grace can allow for an unbeliever to be a very competent car mechanic or medical doctor, so too an unbeliever can be skilled in statecraft. Nevertheless, these things do not happen in a vacuum. Humanly speaking, the chances of a pagan being virtuous and competent rise considerably in a culture inundated with evangelical Christian faith, and they plummet as true faith and practice decline. Now, all civilizations have some memories of the truth from Noah, and rumors of the truth spread to the nations from Israel, for example, through Joseph or Moses, Solomon, Jonah, Jeremiah, which can actually be forms of special revelation and may have included saving grace from time to time. Think of Melchizedek, Pharaoh, Jethro, Nineveh, Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, etc. This means that individuals and cultures may understand, describe, create, or invent with varying degrees of truth, goodness, and beauty because of the image of God, natural revelation, and various salvific influences in history. But apart from Christ and his clear word, pagan civilizations ultimately amount to cautionary tales, with brief glimpses of God's glory in the rubble. Greece is no exception. The Greek inheritance. The Greek age ranged from roughly 1200 BC to Alexander the Great, around 323, careening from wars and chaos and betrayals to despots and dictators and conquests. The lasting legacy of Greece is a persistent cultivation of beauty, in language, poetry, narrative, but also in visual arts, temples, statues, etc. But arguably, it was the love of beauty and wealth that constantly betrayed them. As Helen was the cause of the Trojan War, so too land, money, and power were almost constantly the causes of bickering, strife, enslavement, and war, with brief interludes of peace. Homer famously gave the world the Iliad and the Odyssey, which highlight the warring and capricious gods that drive the fates of crafty men who mimic their gods in hopes of dying with honor. While the stories are captivating, there is no underlying order to appeal to, other than some vague notions of honor and courage. While the Olympian deities were the more popular and beautiful forms, the real power of Greek religion was driven by the darker, chthonic deities inhabiting the underworld, requiring blood sacrifices to be appeased. Remember Agamemnon's daughter, Iphigenia, sacrificed by her father in exchange for fair sailing winds to Troy, and then the repercussions he faced with his wife upon his return. Sophocles, 497 to 406 BC, describes the problems of ancient Greece well in his trilogy. Dark fates, bloodthirsty furies, and almost constant murder, betrayal, and tragedy in search of honor and glory. His suggested solution is only dimly helpful. His trilogy ends suggesting that cultural harmony will come through the civilization of cities and democracy. Introducing a notion of justice and harmony. Solon, 630 to 560 BC, was likely a contemporary of the prophet Jeremiah. He appeared briefly to propose a civil order for Athens, introducing some measure of checks and balances and division of powers, hoping to make room for more involvement of citizens in deliberations for the city and less room for the wealthy and powerful to run roughshod over the poor and middle classes. A mixed government that was neither pure aristocracy nor pure democracy. This is one of the lasting contributions of Greek political science, the goal of balancing the tendencies of human cultures through mixed government. Solon spoke much about the necessity of justice, the Greek word is dike or dikesune, and a righteous order, eunomia. While his notion of justice seems to be more akin to karma, what goes around comes around, he at least had some notion that a just civil order aims at a kind of harmony, a balance of powers and interests, reducing violence and tyranny. Solon's attempted reforms barely lasted a few years, although some of his ideals remained in the air of Athens for the next half-century, a city run by semi-benevolent despots, beginning with a man named Pisistratus. The Great Greek Age and Wars. The Great Age of Greece is commonly considered the period of the 5th and 4th centuries BC, beginning roughly around 510 BC with the death of Pisistratus' sons and the emergence of something leaning more and more towards a pure democracy. With the rise of the threats of Persia and Carthage, the warring city-states combined forces to repel them from 498 BC to 448 BC. In the Greco-Persian Wars, chronicled by Herodotus, with flashes of military brilliance, the short-lived peace was almost immediately destroyed by the Peloponnesian Wars between the largest of the Greek city-states, Athens and Sparta. This is in 431 to 405 BC. These wars were famously chronicled by Thucydides. Most educated Americans at the founding of America read the stories of this era as a cautionary tale of pure democracy, as a period in which Greek democracies managed to both save their lands and then almost immediately destroy themselves. Russell Kirk says, quote, "The Great Age of Greece was a democratic period in Athens and many other states. That was one reason why few American politicians, until the time of Andrew Jackson, chose to proclaim themselves Democrats," unquote. Pure democracy was considered only a small step from anarchy and mob rule. As Benjamin Franklin is alleged to have said, quote, "Democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what is for dinner. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote," unquote. Simple majorities are no guarantee of wisdom or justice. Conclusion. We will come back to the legacies of Plato and Aristotle, but for now, remember that democracy eventually destroyed the independence of Greek city-states, and then Alexander the Great stepped in to provide, quote-unquote, unity by the sword. This was the concern of the early Americans as well. Pure democracy tends to unravel into mobs and anarchy, leaving a social, political vacuum inviting tyranny, just like the French Revolution left a gaping hole for Napoleon Bonaparte. History teaches us that cultures tend to veer from extreme to extreme, and specifically from anarchy to tyranny, or oligarchy, and back again. Natural law suggests that a mixed government that seeks to balance these extremes would be best for human flourishing, a government that included elements of democracy and monarchy and aristocracy. And that is exactly what we find in biblical revelation. Judges of tens, fifties, hundreds, and thousands, cities, tribes, and nation, family, church, state, all with democratic input, representational leadership, governed by law. The name for this style of government is a republic.